The message came through the void like a dying scream. It traveled across star systems, bouncing from relay to relay until it reached the great council chambers where 1,000 alien species gathered to make decisions. The Velhari were drowning in blood, and they needed help. Admiral Saranth of the Velhari watched his world burn from orbit. His people were aquatic, peaceful beings who had never known war. They built cities beneath crystal waters and sang songs that could heal the sick. They had no weapons worth mentioning, no soldiers trained for battle. Why would they? The galaxy was civilized. The council promised protection, but the Kranich swarm did not care about promises. They came like a plague of metal and flesh, their ships blocking out the stars. They did not negotiate. They did not make demands. They simply consumed everything in their path. Worlds, stations, entire civilizations disappeared into their endless hunger. Saranth sent the distress call himself, his webbed fingers shaking as he pressed the transmission key. He begged for help. He explained that his people were dying, that the children were screaming in the underwater cities as the Kranich's bioweapons poisoned the oceans. He waited for the council to respond with their mighty fleets. The council debated. They formed committees. They discussed proper protocols and whether military intervention would set a bad precedent. They talked while the Velhari died by the millions. The signal went everywhere the council networks reached. It went to the proud Korthan Empire with their ceremonial war fleets that had not seen real combat in 200 years. It went to the Deshan Confederacy, who believed all conflicts could be solved with enough conversation. It went to 100 different species who had grown soft and comfortable in the long peace. The signal also went somewhere else. Somewhere the council had marked with warnings so old that most species forgot why they were there. A yellow star with a single inhabited planet in a quarantine zone. The ancient markers around that system said the same thing in every known language. Death World. Do not approach. Dangerous life forms. Earth received the message. Commander. Diane stood in the command center deep beneath the Korean peninsula. The room was filled with screens showing data from 1,000 hidden satellites. Earth had been watching the galaxy for 300 years, ever since first contact went wrong. The aliens came expecting to find another peaceful species. Instead, they found humans. The galaxy learned quickly that Earth was different. It was a world where everything tried to kill everything else. Diseases that evolved faster than medicine could counter them. Weather that could wipe out cities. Predators that hunted in packs. And humans who survived all of it by becoming the deadliest predators of all. When the aliens saw human history, they were horrified. The wars, the genocides, the weapons designed to kill millions. They saw a species that had nearly destroyed itself 12 times and somehow kept surviving. They quarantined Earth and tried to forget humans existed. Doyen read the Velhari message 3 times. He was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had fought in the Gene Wars when he was young, back when humans were still killing each other over resources and ideology. He knew what desperation looked like. He called the War Council together. They met in a room that had no windows, deep underground where no satellites could see. There were 12 of them, representing what remained of Earth's unified military command. They did not trust the galaxy, and the galaxy did not trust them. General Yoonji spoke first. She was older than Doyen, her face marked with scars from the climate collapse riots. The council will not help them in time. We all know this. It is not our fight, said Admiral Kwang Ho. He commanded the orbital defense fleet, the ships that kept Earth safe from anyone who might decide humans were too dangerous to live. We have our own people to protect. The Velhari are dying, Doyen said quietly. Millions of them. Children. The room fell silent. Humans had done terrible things to each other throughout history, but they also had a strange quality that the galaxy did not understand. They could not watch the innocent suffer without feeling compelled to act. "If we reveal ourselves," Yunji said slowly, "if we show the galaxy what our military can really do, they will fear us again. Maybe worse than before." "Let them fear us," said Captain Minha. She was younger than the others, a woman who commanded the stealth carrier Shadow of Terra. Her ship could cross half the galaxy without being detected, using technology that would terrify the Council if they knew it existed. Better to be feared and do what is right than to be forgotten and live with cowardice. They voted. It took less than 5 minutes. 12 hands rose in agreement. Earth would answer the call. Minha returned to her ship with her orders. The Shadow of Terra was beautiful in a deadly way. All black metal and sharp angles, bristling with weapons that the galaxy had banned centuries ago. Her crew of 200 waited in the hangar, already preparing for deployment. Tactical Officer Junho was checking weapon systems when she arrived. He was young but brilliant, able to see patterns in chaos that others missed. Weapons Specialist Hiron stood nearby, her hands moving over holographic displays as she programmed missile solutions. Combat Medic Taiwan loaded his supplies, including tools designed to treat injuries that peaceful aliens could barely imagine. "We are really doing this?" Junho asked. Minha looked at her crew. They were volunteers, all of them. Nobody was forced to serve in Earth's military anymore. They chose this life knowing they might never be thanked for it. "Yes," she said. "The Valhari asked for help. We are going to give it to them." The Shadow of Terra launched in silence, slipping past Earth's defense grid and into the darkness between stars. Behind them, the planet that had birthed humanity turned slowly in the void. Ahead, somewhere in that vast darkness, people were dying. The Warworlders were coming. The journey to Valhari space took 3 weeks at maximum stealth speed. The Shadow of Terra moved through the void like a ghost, avoiding all detection grids and trade routes. Minha spent those weeks preparing her crew for what they would find. They knew it would be bad. The last transmission from Aquilus Prime had been screaming. When they finally arrived at the edge of the Valhari home system, what they saw made even hardened soldiers pause. Orbital stations were shattered and floating in pieces. Debris fields marked where defensive platforms had tried and failed to stop the Kranix advance. And everywhere, the bioships of the swarm moved through space like hungry insects. "Count?" Minha asked quietly. Junho stared at his screens. 37 capital-class bioships. Maybe 200 smaller attack craft. "Admiral, the Valhari fleet is gone. I am detecting only 7 ships still fighting, and they are barely functional." Below them, Aquilus Prime turned slowly. The planet was beautiful, covered in deep blue oceans and small island chains. But even from orbit, they could see the damage. Dark stains spread across the water where Kranix bioweapons had been deployed. Entire coastal cities were burning. "Weapon status?" Minha said. Hiron smiled grimly. "All systems ready. I have been waiting 300 years for this." That was not quite true, but humans had been preparing for this moment since the quarantine began. They knew eventually the galaxy would need them again. They just hoped it would not be too late when the call came. "To cloak," Minha ordered, "and open a channel to the Valhari flagship." The Shadow of Terra appeared on every sensor screen in the system like a dark miracle. The ship was twice the size of a Valhari cruiser, its hull covered in weapons that looked brutal compared to the elegant but weak Council designs. For a moment, everything stopped. On the Valhari flagship Pride of Akalilus, Admiral Sarenth stared at the unknown vessel with confusion and dying hope. "Identify yourself," he transmitted, his translator making his aquatic language understandable. "This is Captain Minha of Earth," came the reply. "We received your distress call. We are here to help." Sarenth felt his breathing membranes freeze. Earth, the death world. the quarantine zone that even pirates avoided. Stories about humans were told to frighten young Velhari into behaving. Monsters who ate their own dead. Creatures who invented diseases as weapons. A species so violent they had to be locked away for everyone's safety. Sarinth did not know what to say. The council is not here, Minha interrupted. We are. You have maybe 6 hours before the Krennics overwhelm your remaining defenses. Either accept our help or watch your people die. Choose quickly. A Krennic's attack wave noticed the new ship and moved to intercept. 20 biofighters, each one a living weapon grown in the swarm's horrific nurseries. They had destroyed council fleets without taking damage. They lasted 4 minutes against the Shadow of Terra. Hiron launched a swarm of human drones. Small autonomous fighters that moved with precision the Krennics could not match. The drones cut through the biofighters like knives through water, targeting weak points that the Krennics did not know they had. When the biofighters tried to adapt, Hiron simply switched ammunition types. Kinetic rounds, plasma bursts, electromagnetic pulses, and then, most terrifyingly, something the galaxy had banned centuries ago. Missiles that tore through shields and flesh, carrying warheads that made the biofighters simply cease to exist. Nuclear weapons. Primitive, brutal, effective. The Krennic's attack wave was destroyed. The Shadow of Terra had not even moved. Sarinth made his decision. We accept your help, Captain Minna. Please save us. Over the next 3 hours, the Shadow of Terra demonstrated what 3 centuries of isolation and preparation could produce. The ship moved through space with grace that should have been impossible for something so large. It deployed weapons platforms that simply appeared in orbit, already targeting Krennic ships. It coordinated attacks with a precision that suggested the entire crew thought as one mind. Junho analyzed the Krennic's movements and found their weakness. They share information too perfectly, he explained to Sarinth over an open channel. Every ship knows what every other ship is doing. It makes them coordinated but predictable. And if we disrupt their communication network, they lose that advantage. How do you disrupt the biological network? Sarinth asked. Junho's smile was not comforting. Carefully, the Shadow of Terra launched specialized missiles that the Velhari had never seen before. They did not explode. Instead, they released electromagnetic pulses tuned to specific frequencies that interfered with Krennic's bioelectric signals. Suddenly, the swarm ships were flying into each other, attacking the wrong targets, completely confused. Hiron used that confusion to devastating effect. A railgun strikes, moving at a fraction of light speed, punched through Krennic's bio-armor like it was paper. Entire ships simply came apart under the assault, but the victory was temporary. Junho's sensors detected something that made him go pale. Admiral Sarinth, he said quietly. The main Krennic's fleet is approaching. Based on the sensor readings, it is 3 times larger than this advance force. And the Galactic Council fleet is still 18 days away. In the Shadow of Terra's medical bay, Taiwan was treating his first Velhari patient. The creature was small and delicate, its skin a soft blue color that reminded him of deep ocean water. It had been injured in an orbital station collapse, its limbs broken in ways that made Taiwan wince. Hold still, he said gently. This will hurt, but I can help you. The Velhari trembled as Taiwan set the broken limbs and injected pain medication. Its large eyes watched him with fear and wonder. Taiwan worked with calm efficiency, his hands steady despite the ship shaking from weapons fire. You are human, the Velhari whispered. I thought humans were monsters. Taiwan wrapped the limbs in stabilizing bandages. We are many things, he said quietly. But right now we are the people trying to keep you alive. That is enough. On the bridge, Minha stared at the tactical display showing the approaching Krennic's main fleet. She had expected this, but seeing the numbers made her chest tight. The Shadow of Terror was powerful, but it was just one ship. They would need more. Send a message to Earth, she ordered. Tell Commander Doyon we need the fleet. All of it. Jano hesitated. Admiral, if we bring the full Terran defense fleet here, the galaxy will see everything we have been building. They will know we are not helpless. They will fear us again. I know, Minha said, but fear is better than extinction. Send the message. As the communication went out, Sarinth watched the human ship prepare for the coming battle. He realized something that shook his understanding of the universe. These humans, these supposed monsters from the Death World, had crossed the galaxy to help people they did not know. They asked for nothing in return. They simply saw a distress call and answered it. Maybe the galaxy had been wrong about many things. Maybe monsters were not defined by where they came from, but by what they chose to do. The Shadow of Terror turned to face the approaching darkness. Its weapons powered up, its shields at maximum. Behind it, the remnants of the Velhari fleet took position. The Warworlders had arrived. Now they would show the Kranix what that meant. The Terran defense fleet arrived like thunder in the void. 12 capital ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their names written in languages the Velhari did not recognize but could feel the weight of Thermopylae, Stalingrad, Incheon Landing. These were names from Earth's bloody history. Battles where humans refused to surrender, even when defeat seemed certain. Commander Doyon stood on the bridge of the flagship, Stalingrad, and looked at the tactical display. The Kranix main fleet was massive, more than 200 bioships of various sizes, all moving with the terrible coordination of a hive mind. They had already consumed 17 civilizations. The swarm did not know how to lose. They were about to learn. All ships report ready, said his communications officer. Weapons hot, shields at maximum. Waiting for your command, sir. Dion studied the enemy formation. 300 years ago, when Earth was quarantined, the galaxy thought they were locking away a dangerous animal. They did not understand they were giving humanity time to prepare. Time to build. Time to perfect the art of war that they had practiced on themselves for thousands of years. Minha, he said over the command channel. What is the civilian evacuation status? On the Shadow of Terror, Minha checked her screens. 70% complete. We need another 4 hours to get everyone off the planet. Then we buy you 4 hours. Dion turned to his tactical team. Execute Formation Delta 7. Show them what a death world can produce. The Terran fleet moved. The Kranix, seeing new targets, redirected half their force to intercept. It was a mistake. The human ships did not fight like the elegant Council vessels with their energy shields and long-range beam weapons. They fought like Earth itself had taught them to fight. Brutal, efficient, and without mercy for those who threatened the innocent. The Kranix bioships fired first, launching living missiles that tracked their targets through space. The Terran ships responded with point defense systems that filled the void with tungsten rounds, shredding the biomissiles before they could impact. Then the human ships returned fire with their own weapons, railguns that accelerated metal slugs to relativistic speeds, plasma cannons that burned hotter than any star in this system, missile pods that launched nuclear warheads in patterns too complex for the Kranix hive mind to predict. And something new. Something that made even the human crews nervous. Quantum shredder beams that tore apart the very fabric that held matter together. 3. Kranix bioships simply ceased to exist in the first exchange. The swarm hesitated for the first time in its existence. These were not like other prey species. These ships fought with a savagery that the hive mind did not understand. But the real surprise came when the Kranix tried their usual tactic of boarding enemy vessels. They grew launch pods on their bioships and fired them at the human fleet. each one containing 100 Kranix drones, ready to tear through ship corridors and consume the crew. The pods reached the Thermopylae and burned through its outer hull. 200 Kranix drones poured into the ship's corridors, ready to overwhelm the defenders. They found Sergeant Jiwan and her platoon waiting. Jiwan was a compact woman, with burn scars on her arms and eyes that had seen combat on 3 continents during the Resource Wars. She held a weapon that looked ancient and crude, a chemical combustion rifle that fired metal projectiles. Behind her, 30 soldiers waited in defensive positions with similar weapons. The Kranix drones rushed forward, expecting easy prey. Jiwan waited until they were in the kill zone, then gave a single command. Fire! The corridor became hell. The humans did not panic. They did not run. They aimed and fired with practiced precision, each shot hitting vital points on the Kranix drones. When the drones got too close, the humans switched to close combat with weapons that the galaxy had abandoned as too primitive. Private Sung-hoon held a position with nothing but a combat knife and his training. When a Kranix drone lunged at him, he dodged with movements that came from growing up in Seoul's underground fighting circuits. His knife found the weak point where the drone's carapace met its neural cluster. The creature died without understanding what killed it. Corporal Soman used something that made the Valhari, observers watching through cameras, feel sick. A flamethrower, a weapon that sprayed burning liquid at enemies. The Kranix drones shrieked as they burned, their hive mind experiencing something it had never known in its 1,000-year existence. Pain. Fear. Within 10 minutes, all 200 Kranix drones were dead. Jiwan's platoon had taken 3 casualties, none fatal. Taiwan was already treating them, his hands steady as he sealed wounds and administered pain medication. On Aquilus Prime, the Kranix had taken control of a coastal colony. Admiral Surinth begged Doyan to avoid that area, saying the civilian casualties would be too high if they bombed it from orbit. "We are not going to bomb it," Doyan said calmly. "We are going to take it back." 3 human dropships entered the atmosphere, their hulls glowing from friction heat. They landed outside the colony and deployed ground forces. Jiwan led her platoon, along with 2 others, a total of 90 human soldiers against an estimated 2,000 Kranix drones. The Valhari military observers thought the humans were insane. This was suicide. They did not understand that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as persistence hunters. They did not just fight, they hunted. And they were very, very good at it. The colony was a maze of underwater tunnels and surface structures. The Kranix controlled it all, their drones patrolling in coordinated groups. But Jiwan did not attack directly. She used the environment. Sung-hoon, who grew up in the mountains, led a team to the high ground and set up sniper positions. His rifle could hit targets from 2 kilometers away. He picked off Kranix sentries one by one, each shot a kill. The drones did not understand they were being hunted. Soman led another team through the sewers, carrying explosives. She placed charges at structural weak points, then lured Kranix drones into pursuit. When they followed her into a narrow canyon, she triggered the explosives. The canyon walls collapsed, burying 300 drones under tons of rock. G1 herself moved through the colony like a ghost. She used thermal camouflage, movement patterns designed to avoid detection, and an intimate knowledge of how predators think. She planted devices that broadcast sonic frequencies that disrupted Kranix communication. Suddenly, the hive mind was deaf and blind in this colony. The Kranix tried psychological warfare, broadcasting images of death and suffering to break human morale. It was another mistake. These humans had studied their own history. They knew about the trenches of World War I, the atomic bombs of World War II, the gene plagues of the 21st century, the climate disasters of the 22nd. They had seen humans do horrible things to other humans and survive it. Junho, watching from orbit, hacked into the Kranix communication network. He was one of the best cyber warfare specialists Earth had produced, able to break encryption that should have been impossible to crack. When he accessed the Kranix shared consciousness, he uploaded something that made the hive mind recoil in horror. Human history. All of it. The Kranix saw cities burning in atomic fire. They saw trenches filled with poison gas. They saw engineered diseases that killed billions. They saw humans fighting humans with a creativity and destruction that the swarm could not comprehend. And they saw that through all of it, humanity survived. The hive mind experienced fear for the second time. These were not prey. These were apex predators who had spent 10,000 years fighting the most dangerous enemy they could find, themselves. The battle for the colony lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Jiwan's forces had retaken every structure with minimal civilian casualties. They had killed nearly 2,000 Kranix drones while losing only 12 soldiers. Taiwan worked through the night treating wounded, both human and Velhari. A young Velhari child watched him stitch a wound on Sunghun's arm with steady hands. "You are not afraid?" The child asked in broken standard. Taiwan smiled tiredly. "Of course I am afraid. Fear is what keeps you alive. But being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway, that is what makes you human." News of the human intervention spread through quantum communication networks. The Galactic Council erupted in panic and confusion. Earth had broken quarantine. The Death Worlders were loose, and they were using weapons that violated a dozen treaties. But the Velhari were broadcasting their own message. They showed the galaxy humans fighting and dying to protect people they did not know. They showed Taiwan treating wounded children with gentle hands. They showed Jiwan risking her life to save Velhari civilians. The galaxy was being forced to confront a truth they had tried to ignore for 3 centuries. Monsters were not defined by where they came from or how they fought. Monsters were defined by what they chose to do with their power. And these humans, these Warworlders, had chosen to stand between the innocent and the darkness. The Kranix did not retreat. The hive mind did not understand the concept. For 1,000 years, they had consumed everything in their path, growing stronger with each civilization they destroyed. They adapted quickly, learning from each battle. That was their greatest strength. It was also about to become their greatest weakness. Commander Dian watched the tactical display with growing concern. The Kranix were pulling back their scattered forces and regrouping. The hive mind was learning human tactics, adapting its responses. In another day, maybe 2, they would become much harder to fight. Then Junho's sensors detected something that made everyone on the bridge go silent. 3 signatures just entered the system, Junho said quietly. Mass readings are off the scale. Sir, those are devourer ships. Every human in the fleet knew what that meant. The Kranix had only deployed devourer ships twice in recorded history. Both times, entire planets had ceased to exist. These bioconstructs were kilometers long, massive living organisms designed for one purpose: to consume worlds whole. They would land on a planet, extend feeding tendrils deep into the crust, and drain everything. Resources, organic matter, even the atmosphere. What they left behind was a dead rock floating in space. 3 of them were heading toward Aquilus Prime. Admiral Sarinth's transmission came through, his voice breaking with despair. Our orbital platforms cannot damage those things. The Council fleet is still 12 days away. Captain Minha, Commander Doan, you need to evacuate while you can. At least save yourselves. Dian looked at his command staff. General Yunji was there via holoconference, her image flickering slightly. We have options, she said carefully. Difficult options. Everyone knew what she meant. The Prometheus Protocol. Weapons that humanity had sworn never to use again after the Gene Wars nearly destroyed Earth. Planet-killer-class warheads, powerful enough to crack continents or ignite atmospheres. Weapons so terrible that their existence was classified at the highest levels. But Earth had brought them anyway. Just in case. If we use those, Minha said over the command channel, we prove the Council right about us. We prove we are the monsters they feared. If we do not use them, Doyen replied quietly, 3 billion Velhari die, and their blood is on our hands. The argument went back and forth for precious minutes. Some argued for withdrawal, saying humanity could not risk revealing their most terrible weapons. Others argued for immediate deployment, saying hesitation meant genocide. It was Hiron who proposed the alternative. We do not target the Devourer ships, she said, her fingers dancing across tactical displays. We target the gas giant in the outer system. It is mostly hydrogen with a small core. If we destabilize it with precise nuclear strikes, we can trigger a fusion reaction. The explosion will be massive enough to destroy the Kranix fleet while preserving Acolis Prime. John-Ho ran the calculations, his face growing pale as the numbers appeared. It could work, but the timing has to be perfect. The shockwave will travel at 0.03 light speed. We need to position it so it catches the Kranix fleet, but dissipates before reaching Aquilus. And we need to account for gravitational lensing, solar wind, debris fields. What is the success probability? Doyen asked. 43%, Junho admitted. And if we fail, we might destroy Aquilus ourselves. The command channel went silent. 43%. Less than half. A coin flip with 3 billion lives at stake. What did the Velhari say? Yunji asked. Minha contacted Sarinth directly and explained the plan. She did not hide the risks or pretend the odds were better than they were. She gave him the truth and let him choose. Sarinth looked at his dying world. He thought about his people, their beautiful songs, their art, their children. Then he thought about what humans were offering. A chance, however slim, to survive. Do it, he said. We trust you. Those 3 words carried more weight than any treaty or alliance. We trust you. From a species that had been taught to fear humans, that had heard stories about the Death World and its terrible inhabitants. They were choosing to put their lives in human hands. Doyen would not fail them. The Terran fleet began to move. 6 ships stayed to defend Aquilus Prime from the approaching Devourer ships. The other 6, including the Stalingrad, headed for the gas giant at maximum speed. On the ground, Ji-Wan received new orders. Her platoon needed to hold the main coastal city against Kranix ground forces while the fleet executed the plan. They had to keep the drones occupied and away from the evacuation sites. How long? She asked. 4 hours minimum, came the reply. Ji-Wan looked at her soldiers. They were tired, running low on ammunition, and facing an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. She saw Sung-Hoon checking his rifle, his movements automatic from years of training. She saw Soman preparing defensive positions with calm efficiency. She saw Taiwan sorting medical supplies, knowing he would need every bit of it. 4 hours, she told her platoon. We hold for 4 hours, and we save this world. Anyone have a problem with that? Not one hand went up. They were human. They knew how to be stubborn. The battle that followed became legendary in Velhari history. 90 human soldiers against an army of Kranix drones, fighting in streets and buildings and underground tunnels. They used every trick, every tactic, every desperate measure they could think of. Seun Ji-Hoon held a bridge alone for 17 minutes, his sniper rifle singing its deadly song until he ran out of ammunition. Then he used his sidearm. Then his combat knife. When reinforcements finally reached him, he was surrounded by dead Kranix, but still alive, still fighting. Selman turned an entire city block into a death trap. She rigged buildings with explosives, created false positions that lured Krennics into ambush, and used her flamethrower to create walls of fire that channeled the drones into kill zones where other soldiers waited. Taiwan ran through crossfire again and again to reach wounded soldiers. He did not care if they were human or Velhari. If they were hurt, he helped them. A Krennic's drone caught him in the open once, its claws raised to kill. A Velhari civilian, an elderly engineer, shot it with a human weapon he barely knew how to use. Taiwan saved his life in return, treating wounds with supplies running dangerously low. In orbit, the fleet reached the gas giant. Hyerin coordinated the most complex weapons deployment of her career. 16 nuclear warheads, each one positioned with millimeter precision around the planet's equator. The timing had to be perfect. Detonate too early and the shockwave would be too weak. Too late and the Krennic's fleet would reach Aquilas. All warheads in position, she reported. Awaiting detonation command. Junho was still calculating, adjusting for variables he could barely measure. Solar flares. Cosmic radiation. Gravitational eddies. The Devourer ships were entering Aquilas orbit, their massive forms blotting out stars. Junho, Doyen said quietly. We are out of time. 30 more seconds, Junho pleaded. Just 30 more seconds to verify the calculations. Those 30 seconds felt like years. On Aquilas, Jiwan's platoon was being pushed back. They had lost 8 soldiers. Ammunition was critical. The Krennics were adapting to every tactic they used. Calculations complete, Junho finally said. Probability of success is now 46%. That is the best I can do. Hyerin, Doyen said. Fire. The warheads detonated simultaneously. 16 nuclear explosions in perfect synchronization. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the gas giant began to glow from within. The hydrogen was igniting, fusion reactions spreading through the planet's core. It was becoming a star. The gas giant exploded. The shock wave raced outward at a significant fraction of light speed, an expanding wall of superheated plasma and radiation. It caught the Krennic's fleet like a hammer. The bioships had no chance. The Devourer ships, for all their terrible power, were still biological organisms. The radiation alone killed them. The heat vaporized them. The shock wave tore apart what remained. The main Krennic's fleet, over 200 ships, simply ceased to exist. But the shock wave was still expanding toward Aquilas Prime. Impact in 90 seconds, Junho said, his voice tight. Dissipation rate is within acceptable parameters. I think, maybe. The Terran fleet positioned themselves between the planet and the incoming shockwave, using their shields to help disperse the energy. It was not going to be enough. All ships, emergency power to forward shields, Diane ordered. If we burn out every system on these ships, we can save that planet. The shockwave hit like the fist of an angry god. 2 Terran destroyers, their shields overloaded, were torn apart. The others held, their crews screaming as systems failed and bulkheads buckled. The ships absorbed energy that should have killed them, redirected it, dispersed it. Bought precious seconds for the planet below dot when the shockwave finally reached Aquilas. It had weakened to a level the planet could survive. Massive storms erupted across the oceans. Earthquakes shook the landmasses. But the world lived. 3 billion Velhari looked up at their sky and saw the human fleet, battered and burning. Still standing between them and destruction, G1 sat among the rubble of her defensive position, her platoon around her. They had held. Somehow, impossibly, they had held. Sung-hoon was being treated by Taiwan, his injury severe but not fatal. Selman was already helping Velhari civilians clear debris and search for survivors. The Galactic Council fleet arrived 12 days later to find the war already over. 300 pristine ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons ready. Their crews prepared for the glory of battle. They found a graveyard. The remains of the Kranek's fleet floated in the void. Torn apart by forces the Council could barely comprehend. Aquilus Prime survived, protected by 10 battered human ships that looked ready to fall apart. 2 destroyed Terran vessels drifted in orbit, their crews lost to save a world that was not their own. The Council commander, a Deshan named Velker, stared at his screens in disbelief. His species had led the charge to quarantine Earth 300 years ago. He remembered the reports, the fear, the certainty that humans were too dangerous to be allowed free. Now he looked at what those dangerous humans had done. They had answered a distress call the Council ignored. They had fought a battle the Council avoided. They had saved 3 billion lives while the Council was still forming committees. "Get me the human commander," Velker said quietly. On the bridge of the Stalingrad, Doyen received the transmission. He was tired. His ship was damaged, and he had just lost 200 crew members. He was not in the mood for politics. "Commander Doyen," Velker said formally, "by the authority of the Galactic Council, I order you to return to your quarantine zone immediately. You have violated the terms of your isolation and deployed weapons that are banned under 17 different treaties." Doyen stared at the Deshan's image for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "You order me?" Doyen said softly. "You, who sat in your comfortable chambers while children died. You, who took 12 days to arrive at a battle that lasted 6. You dare to order me?" "The law is clear," Velker said, but his voice was less certain. "Earth is quarantined for the safety of the galaxy. Then the galaxy can go to hell," Doyen replied. "We are done hiding. We are done being afraid of what you think of us. We just saved 3 billion lives. If that makes us criminals in your law, then your law is worthless." The transmission cut off. Across the Council fleet, commanders looked at each other nervously. Earth had just declared independence from the galaxy's authority, and they had the military power to back it up. But not all the Council agreed with Velker's approach. On the Council homeworld, the Great Chamber erupted in the worst crisis in centuries. Conservative factions demanded immediate action against Earth, perhaps even military intervention. They said humans were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. Progressive voices pointed to what actually happened. Humans crossed the galaxy to help strangers. They fought and died for people who feared them. They used terrible weapons, but only to protect the innocent, not to conquer or destroy. And then the Volhari spoke. Admiral Sarinth addressed the Council directly, his image broadcast to every member world. He showed them the battle recordings. He showed them G1's platoon fighting against impossible odds to protect Volhari civilians. He showed them Taiwan treating wounded children with gentle hands. He showed them the Terran fleet sacrificing its own ships to shield Aquilus from the shockwave. "You call them monsters," Sarinth said, his voice breaking with emotion. "You say they are too dangerous to be free. But when darkness came for my people, when we screamed for help, only the monsters answered. These humans are not what you fear. They are what evil fears." The transmission ended with a simple request. The Volhari formally asked Earth to join the galactic community, not as prisoners in a quarantine zone, but as equals, as protectors, as friends. Dozens of other species added their voices. Worlds that had heard about the battle, civilians who watched the recordings, even some Council members who could not ignore the truth anymore. The galaxy was splitting apart over a simple question. What does it mean to be civilized? On Earth, the War Council met again in their underground chamber. They had decisions to make. The galaxy was offering them a chance to return, but on what terms? Some argued for complete independence, saying Earth should stand alone. Others said humanity needed allies, that isolation served no one. It was Captain Minha who proposed the middle path. We accept their invitation, she said. But on our terms. We keep our military. We keep our weapons. We keep our independence. We will not conquer, but we will not be caged either. If they want Earth as an ally, they take all of us. The good and the bad, the noble and the brutal. The vote was unanimous. The response went out to the galaxy, signed by every member of the War Council. Earth would join the galactic community, but it would not apologize for what it was. Humans would not pretend to be peaceful when they were not. They would not hide their history or their weapons. They would be honest about the violence they were capable of, and equally honest about the good they chose to do with that capability. Some species rejected this immediately. They said Earth was too dangerous, that accepting them would bring chaos. Others welcomed it, saying the galaxy needed honest strength more than comfortable lies. The Council, for the first time in its long history, could not reach consensus. So they did something unprecedented. They let individual species choose. If a world wanted Earth as an ally, they could establish relations. If they wanted to maintain distance, that was allowed too. Months passed. The Terran fleet remained in Velhari space, helping with reconstruction. The 2 destroyed ships were recovered, their crews honored in ceremonies attended by thousands of grateful Velhari. Monuments were built listing the names of every human who died defending a world they had never seen before. Sergeant Jiwan found herself teaching Velhari volunteers basic defensive tactics. They would never be soldiers like humans, but they could learn to protect themselves. She was patient with them, adjusting her teaching for people who had never known violence before. Why do you do this? A young Velhari asked her one day. Why risk your life for us? Jiwan thought about that question. She thought about Earth's bloody history, about all the times humans had failed to help each other, about the wars and genocides and terrible mistakes. But she also thought about the times they got it right, when they stood up against darkness, even when it was hard. Because someone has to, she finally said. Because if we have the power to help and we choose not to, what does that make us? Junho helped other species set up better defensive networks, sharing technology that Earth had developed in isolation. He was careful, only giving away what would help them defend themselves, not conquer others. But it was more than the Council had ever shared. Hiren worked with allied shipyards, helping them design platforms that could stand against threats like the Krennics. She taught them that weapons were not evil, that having the capability to fight was different from choosing to fight. It was a lesson the galaxy struggled with. Taiwan established medical exchange programs, teaching other species trauma medicine and receiving knowledge about treatments humans had never considered. He worked with Velhari doctors, sharing techniques, learning from each other. Medicine, at least, was something every species could agree on. Admiral Sarinth and Commander Doyen became unlikely friends. They came from worlds so different, they might as well have been from separate universes. But they understood each other in the way that only soldiers could. They had both seen their people threatened, had both made impossible choices, had both learned that sometimes protecting the innocent required terrible strength. Do you think it will last? Surith asked one day, looking at the joint human-Velhari patrol ships departing from Aquilus orbital dock. This alliance? Dayun considered the question carefully. I think the galaxy is learning something important. That strength and compassion are not opposites. That you can be capable of terrible violence and still choose peace. That the most dangerous species can also be the most protective. And what about Earth? Surinth pressed. What does your world want? The same thing we have always wanted, Doyun said quietly. To survive. To protect our own. And maybe, if we are lucky, to prove that where you come from does not define who you are. We came from a death world, yes. We know violence in ways peaceful species cannot imagine. But we also know what it means to stand against the darkness. On Earth, billions watched the news from the stars with mixed emotions. Some were proud that humanity had proven itself worthy. Others were worried about what would happen when the next crisis came, because there was always a next crisis. But in the underground command center, the War Council made a simple declaration. A message that would be sent to every species that asked for it, every world that needed help, every civilization that faced the kind of darkness the Velhari had survived. The message was short. Just a few words. But they carried the weight of 300 years of isolation, of preparation, of waiting for the moment when the galaxy would need the Warworlders again. Earth stands ready, not for war, but against it. If darkness comes, we will answer. Captain Minna stood on the bridge of the Shadow of Terra, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were learning that the monsters under the bed could be convinced to guard the door instead. It was not a perfect solution. It would not solve every problem. But it was a start. The galaxy had sent an SOS. The Warworlders rose from the shadows, ready for war. But what they brought was not conquest or destruction.